How do you tell when you're in the middle of one place and another, in the middle of a transition, in the dark, in the storm? How do you tell when Jesus is there? How do you tell when you're in the middle of a transition and it's dark and you're rocking back and forth? How do you tell if the figure you seem to see is Jesus? There's a situation with the disciples. Jesus had already finished doing a wonderful miracle, feeding a bunch of 5,000 people. And now he went by himself to pray in a mountain. And he told the disciples, meet me on the other side, the Gentile side. So they got on a boat and they crossed the sea. And they crossed for a while to get to the other side. Now Jesus said, I will meet you there later. So he would not go on the boat. He would find a way to get there to the other side. The meeting place was not to be anywhere but the other side. That was the meeting place. And so the disciples got on the boat as we read, and they began to row. And as they began to row, it was nighttime, so it was dark, and a storm picked up. Because this particular sea is the type where the winds sometimes can just come out of nowhere, and the storms can pick up. And so the disciples, as they were rowing, realized that they hit a storm. And when the storm hit at night, it can be very dark. And when there's a wind and the waves begin to rock with the wind, they realized they were going nowhere. There was not much they could do rowing in this storm. And as they tried to row, as they tried to keep moving, they realized there was a sense of we have to resign ourselves to the storm, which is stronger than us. We are going nowhere. We're going to have to wait this out until this is over. There's a similar experience sometimes we have in New York, especially those of us who take the train. You ride the train, and when the subway goes under a tunnel, you sometimes don't know where you're at. When it leaves one station and you're heading to the next station, if that train stops in the middle of a tunnel, unless you worked for the MTA and you know the columns by number, there's a high likelihood that even though you know you left Roosevelt and you're going to the next stop, you really don't know where in terms of the surface you are. You have to wait until you get to the next stop for you to say, oh, here is where I am. And the disciples were rowing, and they were in the middle of the sea, and they probably had no clue where they were. It was dark, it was light, there was no light, and there was a storm. And so there they were, and they had to resign themselves to waiting the storm out. And then finally, they see this figure walking on the water, and they were afraid, and that makes so much sense. And they said to the figure, and Jesus says to them, it is I, don't be afraid. Take courage, don't be afraid. And then Peter asks the question, the show me your ID question. And the show me your ID question is, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come walking on the water to you. And Jesus says, come. And I can only imagine there was probably a smile on Jesus' face as Peter manages to grab that boat, swing one leg over. And I can imagine while Jesus may be smiling, the other disciples are like, are you kidding me? Okay, you're doing this. And we're going to be the ones to jump in and save you. Fine. So Peter swings his leg over and he walks. Now the miracle of walking on water is, I don't know what you think the miracle is. I know when I was growing up, the miracle for me was defying gravity. It was gravity, you know. If you're walking on water, you can't walk on water because it's gravity. That's not the miracle in the scripture. Gravity is, Isaac Newton, the guy with the apple and the apple falling on his head. They cared about gravity at that point. They knew about gravity in the ancient times. They knew that stuff falls, but gravity wasn't really a thing for them. Gravity is a thing for us. The miracle was that the sea, what it represented, what they knew it to be, was chaos. The sea was chaos. The reason they stayed in their boats praying and hoping they survived was because around them, battering on their boat, was chaos. And God, being God of all, was God of the sea in the beginning of Genesis, and that shows that God has complete power because God was controlling chaos. So when Jesus is walking on the water, the miracle isn't that Jesus is defying gravity. The miracle is that Jesus is overcoming chaos. See, they were stuck in the chaos. They could go nowhere. But when they look, they see that Jesus is moving in spite of the chaos. Even though they could go nowhere, Jesus somehow could. Y'all see, it's a little different than defying gravity. Peter, by walking on the water, wants Jesus to help him overcome not gravity, but the chaos that was the sea. And Peter does it. He steps out on faith. And he walks. I don't know how much he walks. It doesn't really say. But he sees the wind, and I'm assuming that means the waves. And he begins to be afraid. And it says he begins to sink. And he cries out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus saves him. And they end up back on the boat. And Jesus says to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Now this is a passage in the Bible that many of us might think endorses skydiving, bungee jumping. Like faith has to be daredevil stuff, right? If you don't have the courage to do daredevil stuff, then it's not faith. That's not what this passage is about. This passage is about faith, for sure. But it shows us that faith is not about a feeling. Faith is about what we do. And when Jesus says to Peter, "Why did you doubt?" the word doubt doesn't mean why were you skeptical or why didn't you believe. The word doubt means why did you waver? Meaning, why did you go one step forward and then all of a sudden decide to go one step back? That's what doubt is. Faith and doubt are not feelings. Faith and doubt are actions. Faith is not what you feel. Faith is what you do. When Jesus says to them, "Fear not," he doesn't say to them, "Don't feel fear," because you're going to feel fear. He's saying to them, "Don't be stopped by the fear." When he says to you, "Fear not,"